welcome to History Exemplified. And today we're going to be starting our first section of the course, which is Paper 1 Germany. I'm going to be looking at political and governmental changes from 1918 to 89. This, of course, is the preliminary stages of the course, so we're going to be looking at the introduction to Germany by 1918. Now, it's important to note that this is a small section of the course, and really Weimar Germany onwards matter. However, this part of information is more for interpretation type questions for paper 1 to add contextual knowledge. I'll also be releasing a video on how to answer AO1 and AO2 type questions in general, and I will be releasing a video on how to answer AO3 type questions in a couple weeks' time. In order for us to really understand why we need to go over this knowledge, I'll be using this AO1 type question as a frame of reference. So obviously the question reads, how far do you agree the opposition to the Weimar Constitution was the most significant problem for governments to deal with in the years 1919 to 1933? So I'll be highlighting and analysing this question very quickly for us to understand why it may be important to use information to provide complex analysis. And it's important that complex analysis is integral to achieve the higher bands of level 4 and level 5. Now, it's important to know that I am going to be making a scaffold for AO1, AO2, and AO3 type questions for Pearson Edexcel A-level history. Now, these will include how to answer these type of questions, what type of criteria to use, and example essays that I have written personally, and I've had marks by A-level history teachers, which they gave me a level 5 for. Now, I will be releasing this very soon, so in a couple videos time I'll provide more information of where to view this information and these resources for anyone who wants to use them. So looking at the question again, it says, how far do you agree the opposition to the Weimar Constitution was the most significant problem for governments to deal with in the years 1919 to 33? Okay, so looking into the analysis, you can see that they're asking us to assess the importance of the opposition to the Weimar Constitution, and of course to ascertain whether other factors could have been a significant problem from 1919 to 33. Now, it's important to know that you're not only going to be looking at political factors, because this question is hinting at political factors. When it says opposition to the Weimar Constitution, the first thing you're going to be looking at, of course, is political factors. So things such as extreme groups, such as the NSDAP, groups such as the KPD, etc. Those radical groups. I'm looking at revolts such as the Spartacus revolts in 1919, the Cap Putsch in 1920, Munich Putsch in 1924. Those sort of events to, of course, formulate your arguments. We're not only going to be looking at political factors, we'll be looking at economic factors, or even in this case, socio-economic factors, because you need to add a lot of factors in order to create this complex analysis. And arguably, this type of information would be important for you to add, not necessarily as your baseline argument, but as an additional piece of information to add to your complexity of the argument. So I will upload a video on how to answer this type of question. So I might just do a 20-30 minute video of me writing an example question for this question, so you can understand what I mean by all this complexity nonsense and whatnot for you guys to get your level 5 or level 4s, whatever you'd like to achieve. So if you have any questions, again, please like, share, and comment down below. For any questions related ideally to the G-Nationalism course or the Pearson Edexcel A-level history, now please note that I'm only specialised in the G-Nationalism route. I can't answer any other routes questions. I can only answer the G-Nationalism route. Now, for anyone who wants to, look into the G-Nationalism route, I have uploaded a video on this, so you should see a link to this on the top right-hand screen. So you guys can pause the video there and look at that video. if that is important to you. So moving on, so what would I do to add complexity? What I'll be doing is I'll be looking at I'll be assessing whether opposition was more significant in comparison to other factors. Now look at social factors between the Kaiser government, the fact that the Kaiser government was a monarchist state, and that, of course, Weimar Germany is being a democratic state, so it's a completely different change of reference that the German civilians are experiencing in that time. Now, it's important to note that the Kaiser government was more stable at the time economically. He was deemed as a major diplomatic power. They could go on and invade things, and you'll look for more information as this video progresses. And you could argue that this arguably could have been the reason why people opposed the Weimar Constitution, because, quite frankly, economic factors such as the hyperinflation crisis in 1919 to 1923 obviously painted a very upsetting picture of the Weimar state, and the fact that it was democratic and that the Kaiser Germany being a monarchist state, it obviously could have played a part in the sense that it already had a preconceived notion that it wasn't going to turn out well, and the fact that economic factors were there, you can argue that was an additional influence to opposition. You see, that adds complexity because you're adding other things and you're adding other comparisons to your argument. Okay, so the lesson aims in Edexcel today is to develop an understanding of the political situation in Germany by 1918. An objective, of course, as well, is to develop an understanding of the political context of the establishment of the Weimar Republic and assess how this may impact upon the Weimar Republic. So, looking at Germany before 1871, obviously you can see the map of the Holy Roman Empire. This was regarded as the First Reich. You can see it was ruled by the Holy Roman Empire, and it was dissolved by 1806. So this, of course, was formed in 1962 AD. For anyone who is more interested in this type of topic, I suggest you look into it. The Holy Roman Empire is quite a historically rich vein of history, and I really suggest you look into it. It's a very good branch of history. So you need to understand that Germany did not exist before 1871. Obviously, the Holy Roman Empire did dominate there. You could add this as a base of argument to certain things, such as Hitler's ideology, for him to want to become part of this Holy Roman Empire, to be a dominant power, which of course was the Holy Roman Empire. So of course, as you can see, there was many different states. You can see Prussia being, the largest state. And you can see, of course, Bavaria down here, which is actually where Hitler was apprehended in his Munich Putsch, and where he wanted to go from Bavaria to Munich, which of course didn't necessarily work out, which of course you'll see in many videos to come. So, German nationalism. So, German-speaking people of former Holy Roman Empire had a lot in common. All of them had shared language, they had shared culture, and shared legal tradition. Many German people wanted a unified German state. Most German nationalists, of course, were liberal. However, unification would be achieved by German people by elections and popular support. So, obviously, there was already a nationalistic sense within Germany, pre-Weimar Germany. So, obviously, see German reunification. Prussia brought, of course, most of German-speaking states into a German nation state. This is from 1864 up until 1871. This is regarded as the Second Reich. Obviously, you can see this is starting to form a bit like, Germany as we see today. Obviously, the Austrian Empire has a bit of German land chalked off. And you can see that there are many different victories and empires that you don't really need to know, but you just need to understand that this happened, and you could argue this as a additional subservient factor into your um, analysis of certain things. So they could ask you a question on the paper 1 section C, which of course is another video that we'll be uploading very soon. So of course, as you can see, the Second Reich mainly was caused with war and conquest. So what implications might this have for the German attitudes toward other nations and vice versa? So, of course, to answer this question, it gave Germans egoistic traits of being a strong European power, which could be a factor into the whole growth of opposition with the Treaty of Versailles. So the November war criminals was obviously casted and even assassinated to some point. The fact that they surrendered and adhered to this obviously humiliating treaty, especially in terms of war and contrast. You need to remember that Adolf Hitler's main base of argument was based on the fact that the Treaty of Versailles was signed. You need to remember that he was a soldier. So, of course, in his 25 points and Mein Kampf, you can clearly see his desperation into getting back to that level of getting back to war and conquest, which of course is another thing you could talk about when you are structuring and of course answering your essay. So obviously you can see here is the political structure of the Second Reich. You can see the Kaiser up front on the top. So you can see he's hereditary monarch of King Prussia, appointed, dismissed the government, could dissolve the Reichstag, controlled foreign policy and the armed forces, which is quite similar to the Führer title, which in the sense that he was an autocratic leader, he had all the power in the world. And Gagarin did the same thing with the Führer. He wanted to have the same ability of the Führer. Of course, there were many differences in the sense they didn't really have a Reichstag, and there weren't many political parties, if any, within the Nazi Germany. So, of course, this is what you could compare to in your Section C type questions or in any sort of questions. This is just knowledge that you may want to know to add to your complex arguments. So obviously you can see this is Kaiser Wilhelm. He was King of Prussia and Emperor of Germany from 1888 up until 1918. You need to remember that this year, from 1918, that was the end of the Kaiser era. He was an unstable character, so of course he had a withered arm, and he believed in the divine right of kings. He sought to assert German power, so he wanted colonial expansion, which is a similar idea to Nazi Germany. But he was forced to abdicate in 1918 and he died in the Netherlands in 1941. So, those are a couple of facts you may want to know. So, obviously, you have German society and politics. So you can obviously see that Germany industrialized very quickly after the unification. It became one of the leading industrial powers. It led to the emergence of a wealthy middle class and increasingly discontented working class. Industrialists wanted political stability, so they formed a political alliance with aristocratic landowners called Junkers to support Kaiser. Working class sought for better wages and working conditions. They formed the trade unions and political parties. And by 1912, the SPD was the largest party. Now, obviously, Germany was increasingly divided. There were many different parties representing different interests, and few national or broadly supported parties, which of course created an epicenter of dominance within German society and politics. Now, it's important to note these couple of points, such as the Germany industrialized after the unification, because it was arguably a factor that led to Germany doing so well in the development of getting ready for war, especially for the Second World War, and why their European counterparts, such as Italy, did so poorly. Germany, from the earlier stages, were already trying to get better. So much so that even in Nazi Germany, they calculated efficiency of a country and worked out that Italy was quite inefficient. And later on, of course, you will see how that impacted Germany to the extent where they had to give so much to help Italy's downfall, which arguably was a factor to them losing out in the Second World War. So obviously Germany had World War One. There was wide spread support for World War One. You need to remember, yet again, the political attitude or the societal attitude was: we are a dominant European power. We are a very strong European power, and we can get into wars and we can go on and win wars. We need to remember, of course, there was a lot of civilian morale being blasted in the question. It was quite low because of the winter from 1916 to 1917. There was a low food there was low food supplies. Of course, there was increasing prices, which is not what you want, especially within a war. And of course, if the economy is going down bad, obviously socially people are going to be upset. They're going to turn more polarized, and eventually they gave up on the Kaiser. And Wilhelm was forced to give power to military leaders, and eventually, after defeats, he abdicated by 1918. Now, of course, looking at these military leaders, so General Erich Ludendorff, Field Marshal Paul von Hindenburg, continued to ignore the Reichstag, which of course is a continuing factor as to Germany being more aligned to a right-wing sort of government rather than a left-wing, which you'll see later on within the course. That Germany was much more afraid of being socialist than being nationalist. So this is where we're going to end the video today. You can obviously see that we covered quite a bit of content for the introduction to Germany by 1918. There's not really much to show you within this slide. You know, again, this is quite a small section that kind of adds as a base, can add as an additional point to your complex argument, or even in section C, to compare and contrast certain ideas or 4 points that you'll see, of course, me covering over in the section C video that will be uploaded in a couple weeks' time. So for those who enjoyed this video, please like and share. For anyone else taking this course, for anyone else who generally just cares about history, please comment down below for anything that you would like me to answer or cover in later videos. I'll try my best to obviously cover those certain topics. Thank you very much for listening today, and I hope you have a nice day. See you later.